Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope everyone's okay. Hope everyone is good. I mean, let's be honest, it's been a bit of a shit show last few days, unfortunately. And I don't know, maybe this falling has stopped. We're going to have a look in the charts a little bit later on to see whether or not that is the case. But we are seeing a little bit of a pullback today. And when we go through some of the websites outside of the charts, we'll probably get a good indication as to why that might be the case. But I just got to say that I certainly feel it. I think it's sort of a psychology that everyone does. We see, are we green across the board today? 5% Bitcoin, 4% Tau. A lot of the other ones are sort of 5, maybe as high as 10%. And you think, great, we're starting to see that recovery. But we've got to remind ourselves that one, we have had nearly 21 days of falling, 7 green candles in a row. We've gone from 98,000 down to 60,000. With yesterday, I think alone, we lost nearly $20,000. So, we've got to take everything with a little bit of a pinch of salt. It is good to see a sort of a $3,000 move. Actually, it's around about $5,000, $6,000 move because we got all the way down to 60,000 today. And we've got to just take that into, perspective of everything else that we have seen. And it has been quite an aggressive fall. So we'll go through some of that. We'll have a look at sort of, not necessarily what caused it. There's one news article I want to go over, but we'll just try and see where do we find ourselves now? Has the falling stopped? Will it continue to fall just after a breather? And what sort of some of those catalysts may be? Right, looking at the 3-day time frames. Bitcoin has come all the way down. You can see now this is just a plethora of white lines. I started adding areas of support that I would be interested in. We kind of got down to this sort of 63. As I said, we did dip through it this morning, but we have found some support, and that goes all the way back to this range period in 2024. So almost 2 years ago, to be honest. And yeah, that looks like a pretty big waterfall moment. I'm just going to clear these drawings for a second because I think for the longest time we kind of talked about potential bear flag on here, and if I'm just drawing it very roughly, but you can kind of see, we take that line there, we clone it, we move it across. I mean, this is on the linear chart, but it's near as damned. Fallen as far as that bear flag has. So there's a potential that has gone and played out. I do think there were fundamental elements outside of the TA which helped cause the cascade for this price to fall as hard as it has done. I mean, you think on Tuesday when we spoke, we were at 77K. And okay, it seems a little bit better now because we're at 66. But last night we were down in the low 60s. So yeah, a really strong fall from Bitcoin and the rest of the alts across the market. In terms of Bitcoin dominance, well, you can just see how hard Bitcoin has fallen compared to the rest of the market with that there. Almost coming close to that alt season. Doesn't feel like it, but we are still just smack bang in that range. And I imagine we'll see this fluctuate back to the sort of 60% level just as the assets start to sort of balance back out. Total 2, so basically altcoins, we've lost. Oh no, what's this? That's not total 2. We've lost the $1 trillion mark. We got down as low as 870 billion, which takes us to basically almost where we bottomed back in April 2025. As I said, we found a little bit of a breather at the moment. And before we move on to Tau, I think just putting Bitcoin on the big screen here. So we're going to look at things like the RSI. We're going to have a look at fear and greed and everything else. And people are going to talk about, we're the lowest we've beaten on certain time frames since COVID, etc. And they're all absolutely correct. I think for me, the concern that I have right now with Bitcoin's price action is, despite the first half of this day seeing a green candle that has started to fall, Bitcoin I think it's in a real difficult position where we need to actually V-shaped reversal out of this, very similar to what we did back in 2020 with the COVID crash, and just recover it within as many candles as it was caused. and come back down. And by that, I mean getting back into that 90,000 range and beyond. Otherwise, my concern is that really all we're going to have is, some movement around, and it could fluctuate anywhere from the 60,000 bottom that we may have experienced all the way up to sort of that 77, 80,000. And we just start to repeat this pattern here before we have that next move down. And I can see it already, sort of this sort of slow burn potentially up here, and then we just continue down into the bear market and into where the price action is going. And that's my concern. So what we really need to see Bitcoin do over the next week, let's give it to start to see this move, is to start to make that move up. And I do I do require it to be a V shape, okay? An actual, we're getting out of this as quick as we have done. This was just caused by some outliers out there. The market is starting to correct. And so value is going to be put back into the system. And without that, given the statements we made on Tuesday about being in the bear market and just that negative sentiment around there, yes, okay, we would experience pullbacks from any drops. But if it continues to range, my higher probability outcome would be that we actually ended up going further down, and we can have a look at some of those levels a little bit later on. So not exactly the best pitch situation to find ourselves in. For those of you that were sat waiting for the stream to start, you would have seen I'd put a picture of Michael Burry, excuse me, on the thumbnail. And we don't often talk about Michael Burry. Obviously, he did very well 2007, 2008 financial crash, and he's actually doing very well at the moment. He is short Nvidia, short Palantir, and basically nothing else. And he pretty much, I think he actually called the tops on both of those and has not been in the drawdown his position at all. So he is very negative about the market. But yesterday, might have even been the day before, he came out and didn't have some very nice things to say about Bitcoin's price action, effectively stating that it was in a death spiral. And this is going to go for a lot further than we thought. At the time he made that conversation, it was around about 80K. So, he's already on the money there. And he sort of put it actually to the fact that we were tokenizing the precious metals. So I don't have the chart available. Maybe it's in this news article. I don't think it is. You just have to take my word for it. But I'll summarize this and then I'll put it onto a chart. But effectively what he's saying is now that exchanges are trying to build up on the hype of precious metals, we've seen the likes of Coinbase, Binance, BitUnX, Blowfin, all of these perp exchanges now tokenizing silver, in which you can put USDT or Bitcoin down as your collateral and trade these precious metals to try and sort of capitalize on that incredibly strong move up the likes of silver have had, which was all great until the music stopped for silver and gold last Friday, and we saw those epic corrections. $1.7 trillion worth of value wiped off in 90 minutes. Gold dropping 11% in a day, silver dropping 20% in a day, and just coming down. And then at the same time, Barry goes on to say is Bitcoin was also crashing. So you had, these forced liquidation events happening because people had put, longs onto silver, which had dropped rapidly. They're getting liquidated, but they've also put their Bitcoin down as their collateral, and Bitcoin's price was falling through the floor at the same time, which was causing cascading liquidating events. And then what we see is that people having to sell winning positions just to repay the losing positions that they had. And that's why you're saying it was a bit of a death spiral, because actually all that's going to happen is people are then going to have to get out of other assets to pay off these, or to avoid liquidation events, etc., to pay off back loans, etc., things like that. And it's just going to keep on going down and down and down for Bitcoin. Now, I'm not suggesting he was saying it was going to go to zero, although he's not a particularly big believer in Bitcoin. But it was interesting just to sort of run through how he thought that might happen and where it was going. And to be fair to him, he is certainly a contrarian. He likes to take the unpopular view on things, and history will say he's quite accurate on these. I don't follow him enough to know whether or not that is the case. But I do know that $3 billion worth of Bitcoin has been wiped out in long liquidations. And I think it's something like 530,000 accounts that affected it. So you talk about how degen this market is, because everyone was looking at the price of Bitcoin going, well, we've fallen so far now, surely it's time to long. And they just kept on doing it, kept on trying to enter in the long, hadn't really found that bottom yet, and the floor kept on going down. So it's a difficult position that the market in general finds ourselves. I can tell, read the sentiment in Discord as to how people are feeling. You can certainly tell the people that are on the sidelines versus the people that are still in positions. And I just want you to know that if anyone's feeling particularly uncomfortable, yesterday I actually sold a little bit more Bitcoin at 64,000, and we've already gone back above it. When I went to bed and we're down at 60, I thought that was a good move. I got it this morning and we're at 65, and I am reluctant to buy any back just yet. I will make that decision a little bit later on, but you know, just to say, we can't always time the market perfectly. I sold it at the time because I just, my position was around about 75.25. I just thought I'd rather be out than in at the moment. So let's just take a little bit more off the table. I sold a smidge, really, less than 5% of that remaining 25. I'm really sorry. Someone's at my door and there's no one here. I'll be 2 seconds. Apologies. Apologies. Sorry. Wife was ordered some bedding. That's where that was. Anyway, lost my train of thought. Completely lost my train of thought. I'm not sure where we're at. We will just, I was talking about, I'd sold a little bit of Bitcoin. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, my other sales were a bit further up, so that's fine. The market has turned. I think I just need to give it a little bit, see where it is. Maybe even today might help me decide whether that was a smart move. Now, whoops. When we go into the fear and greed, you probably say, Harry, that was not a smart move. We're actually down at 9. I don't know we've been this low since the last bear market. I don't think we have. 2022, we got to 7, 6. What's this one down here? Can't quite get to it. 5. So we have not been this low, certainly since 2022. And I kind of saying to myself, even looking at this, when there's blood in the water, you buy. I think I might actually convince myself to buy that little bit back, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Not a particularly smart move last night when I think about it. But, we all get caught up in a little bit of emotion sometimes, I suppose. ETF outflows, we saw actually less selling yesterday than the day before, but we still saw plenty of outflows going in. It's not looking great when you look at the right-hand side. 2 out of the last 15 days are black. One of those might as well have just been a 0 because it was only 6. So it does seem that institutions aren't moving on. They're scared, they're worried, they're not particularly happy. Not a good position for us. Trump's spoken actually, so it's not too much. We've got some consumer sentiment, but there's nothing really too much for us to sink our teeth into. And when you actually look at the fear and greed and CMC, we're down at 5. Now let's just have a look at some of these. 24 hours. So there have been some that have actually done okay. Not many, but there have been some. But we flip it the other way. We can kind of see the bloodbath that has been going on. Just take a second to think that Trump coin at one stage was worth $80. It's not worth 3. But anyway, let's try and scroll down. So this takes into case the last 24 hours. So bear in mind that also includes the last 12 hours worth of the pump that we've seen. But some of them still down double digits. How far do we have to go before it stops being double digit? 20. The 20 have seen double digits. Any that we're particularly into, Ethereum's sub 2,000 now. We're going to have a look at these, don't worry. Near's at $1, Chainlink. So BitTensor, 167, got down to 143 last night. Let's have a look at Polkadot. Where is it? 130. Okay, buy, apparently. But yeah, so not particularly good. I don't know where Bitcoin sits on this. I haven't come across it yet. Must have passed it at some stage. Um, anyway, it doesn't necessarily matter. Let's get into some of the chart now that we're here. Daily time frame for Bitcoin. Actually, let's start with the weekly, because I think we should look at the big picture. I think that is certainly something to have a look at. So 60,400, I think that was the bottom that we marked, but maybe it went a little bit lower. But 60,000 for cash is where we got to. We can kind of see we also yesterday in that candle, or this week, sorry, we've broken the 200 EMA. I'm gonna have to get rid of those because they are in the way. Okay. We have sort of had a decent bounce from this, and all eyes will be over the next couple of days from the weekly point of view. Can we recover above the 200 EMA? That is a pretty big level in terms of sort of bear markets, and certainly something that we want to be having a look at. I've left the RSI down the bottom nice and sort of big, if you will. We are in the oversold territory, and on the weekly time frame, that rarely happens. If we can just scroll out, you can have a look. So we got that on there in June of 27. That is after the Celsius and 3 arrows capital crash. We got down that low. We didn't even get down that low when COVID hit, and even the capitulation event that happened in November of 2018. We only just got to 29. So this is pretty much the second lowest we've ever been, and getting very close to the lowest we've ever been for Bitcoin on the RSI. So we are talking about extreme levels of fear and selling, which once you try and take the emotion out of it, is genuinely a good time to buy for long term looking back into it. So got to always take that with a pinch of salt. The reason I've come on to the weekly though is I was trying to think, where could we go? Particularly yesterday when everything was falling, we hadn't had today's recovery. It was, what levels would I be identifying as areas of concern for me to get to? And I was trying to find vectors. And to be honest with you, no vectors really left until we get down to some levels that I don't want to talk about, but we're going to, once I just sort of, we had the 60,000, which was basically, I'll zoom in now so you can see it a little bit better. I was just trying to sort of pick up as many of these candles and wicks as we can. Sort of 60,000 kind of tied in there. And then I was sort of looking, what about the base of this wick down? Perhaps that's a level we could have a look at. Lower time frames. It is a green vector candle there, but I just wonder if on the lower time frames there's some vectors left. That's basically at 50,000. It's 49,900. We'll call it 50,000 for cash. So that's sort of the level that I'd be looking at. But then the next true level for vector recovery, and I don't think we can rule it out. We may want to rule it out. We may want to stick our heads in the sand. But seeing the speed at which the market has fallen, and we're going to get onto it. It wasn't just crypto that fell. It left me with looking for vectors, and the vector I can see, unfortunately, is sandwiched between 30,000 and 34,000. And then if you want to go any lower than that, then sadly we're down 26,000 level. I'm not telling you that's going to be the bottom of where the market is, and I'm not telling you we're going to get there tomorrow. I'm just saying, if you want to have a look at some big picture side of things, never rule out how far it can go. And no one ever seems to rule how high it can go. So we've always got to play the counter side to that. But this could certainly be a player. And for those of you that say, oh, well, you know, the RSI, it's down at its lowest, it's up only from here. That is not the case. It's not how the RSI works. And if we go back to 2022, so the fear and the cascade of selling from 3 arrows capital caused this to go down to the lowest it was at 24. But look, the RSI climbed up, but the market continued to go back down. And we sort of found that, you know, after recovering up to 24,000, went all the way back down to sort of 15,000. So there is still opportunity for that to fall further just because the RSI is low. Yes, we may get a bit of ranging period within it, and then we look to reset, but please don't just rule that out. I think for the sort of immediate big picture, I'll be looking to see whether or not we can recover the 200 weekly EMA. Below that, I think we may, if we stay below the 200 weekly EMA in the next 3 days, 2.5 days time, I think we'll at least retest 60K, you know, double bottom kind of attempt before we give it another run and a breakthrough. If we can't break above the 200, if we do break above the 200 EQA, there's an argument to be said, right, well, we've sort of managed to stabilize sufficiently and we can look to build from that. And when we get on the smaller time frames, we'll have a look at some targets to the north that we'd be looking at. Again, if we come back down for the 60, I think all of this range is in play. It's kind of in play now, to be honest, because if you actually think about it, I'll do it with a rectangle. This was, I know it's wicks a little bit either side of it, but that was the range. I'm just going to put it in yellow. That was the range that we were stuck in for sort of 6-7 months back in 2024. 73,000 down to 50,000. And we kind of, we're back within that range. We kind of came down to the midpoint here. And there's an argument to be had now, unfortunately, that if we can't break north of where the weekly closes is at 71,500, do we just end up reliving within this range? Because it was such a level of support and resistance for us that actually we just find that we're stuck within multiple levels within here, and we trend sideways, or worse still, we form that bear flag formation that I drew, and we have a look at another move down. I'm trying to understand why I drew that circle. I'm hoping it's going to be when I go onto the lower time frames. So we're going to move on to the daily, and yes, it is. Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to get rid of this rectangle. We'll have a look at the daily time frame, and we can kind of see just the real picture of how much this has fallen, how fast this has fallen, even just by looking at things like the EMAs. So the EMAs there, they're almost going vertical. The 10, the 20 vertical, both of those have penetrated through the 800 EMA. The 50 is on a pretty steep downturn, and the 200's heading that way as well. So there's plenty of negative sentiment which is dragging these things down. Good news, we have left vectors in our wake. Bad news about that is we ain't ranging. So we always talk about reclaiming vectors once we're ranging. Not really in a range at the moment. We need to establish that range, but it may give us some sort of direction as to what those ranges, so the tops of those ranges could be. Now, we kind of track the 10 EMA on the daily time from the way down, and yes, we are significant away from it. And so maybe over the weekend, particularly with nothing else playing, we have sort of that weekend move towards the 10 EMA, which has controlled us. But if we actually try and extrapolate what that's going to be, what's the best thing to do? Trend line, I suppose. It's going to be hard to draw this, I accept. It's going to kind of look something like that. We turn it blue, make it a little bit thinner. And so there's an argument to be had that over the next 2 days, maybe we get back into the low 70,000s. We're covering pretty much the majority of that vector candle formed from yesterday's price action. But the 10 has held us back pretty well. So, there's nothing to say that from that we don't look to recover. Now, that is still another 10% from where we are at the moment. So for those of you that are feeling particularly brave enough, and I'm pretty much tempted myself, I've got to be honest, maybe there is an opportunity for a short-term long there. If you're disciplined, if you're willing to sort of find a good entry, be strict about where your stop loss or however you want to play it, if you're doing it with a smaller amount and a liquidation point, whatever, and have that, but also not being too greedy. If you don't see it bursting through that 10 EMA, you start taking profit from it there. Maybe there is an opportunity there for some of us to take it. That being said, let's see what else we can see. And oops, that's not what I meant to do. Let's get rid of this. Someone asked me if we could use a fib to try and determine where the pullback is going to be. And yesterday, that was hard for me to answer because we didn't really have a definitive bottom that we could work from. Now, we don't know that we have a bottom at the moment, but for just content, if nothing else, but just to sort of give you a view of it, we can certainly draw a fib on this, maybe from this top down here, drawing it down to this one here, and we can sort of try and see if there's any levels that we might be interested in. Obviously, we're interested in the orange levels. The golden ratio 618 is at around about 82,000. Interestingly enough, at the 800 EMA, assuming that 62,838 is our bottom, if you will. So I think there's some interesting levels there. There's one just under 70,000, which you can kind of see is the 50% of this red vector candle that's what's remaining. So again, something to work from on there. But if you just try and remember some of these numbers, sort of 70,000, 74, 78, 82, because if we wanted to try and see if there's any sort of correlation, we pull this back to actually October 2025 and the all-time high. Is there anything from there? Well, that 82 is now 81, so that kind of works. That 74 we talked about, if you remember, is 73,870 and 96, so pretty much 74 again. So there's two levels there. Of course, they're not 618 and 382 anymore, or 0.5, sorry, because we've stretched it up, but two are actually overlapping quite nicely. And I mean, it would be amazing if we get there. V-shaped reversal back up to 96,000 and 618. I mean, that's going to put a lot of, I would feel very comfortable with the market recovering if it managed to do all of that. But there's some levels if you want to draw the fibs. I'm taking it with a pinch of salt. We don't know that that's the bottom. Okay. So this could just be a reflective relief rally after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8 out of the last 9 days, the market falling. So just please take those with a pinch of salt, because someone did ask about them. In terms of, I mean, the vectors kind of speak for themselves. EMAs kind of line up. We talked about the fibs. Let's go down to the 4-hour time frame. Kind of see. So now we kind of see, you know, the RSI, even with a 10% climb from its base of 60,000, 66, we're still actually oversold. I mean, that's how far and how deep we were in the oversold element. We were down at 12. So when we talk about you know, needing some sort of relief rally, this is kind of it. I mean, look how red this is down here. It's the real depths of it. And again, trying to find levels that we might sort of draw back. We've got this the top of this vector candle from, what was this, 12 o'clock yesterday, just prior to when the market's open, I suppose, 70,000. That's going to take you towards the 10 and the 20 EMA. Certainly could both be players there. The 50 EMA is a little bit higher than the 74. So depending on how long it takes to get there, 2 more candles will see the 50 EMA come down to the 74 level, 74,000, which we identified through the fibs a little bit earlier on. So certainly could have some room there. We haven't been back to the 50 EMA in a while, but as we can see, much with the daily, it's been the 10 that's controlling us. So again, you know, potentially expect to move up to 67,500. But if it doesn't work, if it bounces off that, then I'm thinking we're retesting 60 at the bare minimum. If just for a double bottom and another attempt up, if not falling back through. So that's kind of where I'm sort of, am I just getting in a little bit too late here? And a little bit too early. I need to let the patterns play out. And for the sake of another $2,000, do I just wait to see what moves there? I don't know. I keep on convincing myself either way on that one. Again, though, this one does at least give us a bit more of a true indication of a base. So let's just see on the 4-hour. We'll now take it from here, which was a little bit different. See what we can do. Okay, there's some similar-ish numbers there. It's not 69,000 anymore. It's 68,000. It's not 74,000. It's 75,000. It's not 82. It's 83,000. So there's some similarities with these. They don't really line up with any of the EMAs. There's a potential one, I suppose, depending on what the 50 does. So I don't know which one you'd want to take as more accurate, really. I suppose this one here is a little bit better in that we've now got, I think it must be because this is back from when I originally took it. It must be from when I originally took it and why it's lining up so well. Because we've got 82, 78, and 74, 69. So yeah, okay. Don't think that's told us anything new, to be honest with you. We'll go down the hourly just to try and see if there's anything there. And what I would say, we can now see actually, you know, stopping vector candle as well. That nice green vector candle very quickly recovered from that move down. And actually we got as low as, I mean, it's $60,000. So, you know, almost manipulable, if that's the right term. But we can actually now see we are in a bit of a rising channel, and this channel's working out quite nicely for us. Oh, it's in white. It normally should be in white, but there's definitely something kind of here at the moment. And maybe we could just sort of chug along. How many hours is it going to take? So this 12-1. Markets are opening here. Let me just draw the line. So the markets are going to open between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Let's just say 3 o'clock. If we keep on trudging along as we are at the moment, you know, we're battling with the 20 EMA. I accept at the moment. We haven't been able to break through, but we haven't lost it. You know, we've hit the 20 EMA, and the 10 and the 20 are pretty much just playing each other off. Breakthrough of that, then that move up to the 50 EMA, there's a vector there to take it. There's a channel that we're working to. You know, we don't even have to rush it. We've got another 3 or 4 hours in which we can do that before the big markets open, and maybe we see a real move after that. And we look to recover that vector. So again, there could be a move at 69,000 on the cards, quite simply, just moving up in this channel. It's a rising channel in a falling market, though. So at some stage, it might well end up doing that. The RSI itself is resetting quite nicely. We're kind of back in the middle of the pack again after a fairly poor drop, but everything's moving in the right direction as you would look to expect. The 200 EMA, if we can get through that 50, I mean, it's going to be down at that 74 level we talked about beforehand. If we can finish climbing, and it doesn't have to be too aggressive, but if we don't see a drop today and we go into the weekend with it closed, with the rest of the markets closed, I actually think we could see a weekend pump, which may end up correcting itself, I accept. But I think we could see that weekend pump just moving up through. So I think there's something to go on with that. But my sort of caveat at the moment really is, if we're looking on the hourly, what are we doing in and around this 50 EMA? A loss of it, I think we come, as I say, and retest. Well, I've drawn it down to the base of that wick, but the argument should really be that 62,000, which is what it was on the daily and the 4-hour candles. But a retest there, and then maybe that double bottom and a move up. We've not really actually done a wave count, but I won't waste anyone's time on that at the moment. I might just have a look at it afterwards. That's looking pretty hard to read on the time frames. Right. Okay. So that's kind of where we sit with Bitcoin. The reason I had circled this, sorry, to go back to the big picture on the ways down, I was trying to look at other vectors, and there is a vector. It's actually not at 50, it's at 47 to 45. And that's the next one that potentially could be looked to be recovered. So I suppose a loss of 60K, I think the bottom of the range, that 50,000 is probably where we would end up going. And then it's a case of how greedy the market makers want to be in terms of taking it down a little bit further and driving it through. But I've been saying since Tuesday, I expect some sort of relief rally because just of how low we are on the RSI. I still expect that. It doesn't mean we're going up to overbought. I'll be honest with you, particularly on the daily or the weekly time frame, but just getting a little bit of a relief. We're trying to reset that sentiment, reset the fear and greed before we have another move away. Okay. Should we do Tau now, or I think we'll do Ethereum first, and then we'll come back on to Tau, because we're talking here about just the altcoin market in general, Ethereum being the leader for that. Very similar picture to what Bitcoin has done in terms of a bear flag drawn out, the steepness in which it's come back down, the EMAs all lining up, and there's plenty of vectors for it to go. Crucially, though, we are below that $2,000 level. Why is that important? Well, for the $2,000 level for Ethereum, actually it was a little bit higher, so it's 2,100. I thought this line was going to be better drawn. There it is. It acted as such a level for the market to bounce, for Ethereum to bounce from it. Sometimes it didn't live through it much longer, but it did have those strong bounces. But this time we punched all the way through it. I will zoom in so you can see these candles a little bit clearer in a moment. But I just want you to try and sort of take in where we are here. We've got this other drop from April of 2024, and then you can't see because my head's in the way. But then sort of the base of this range back in the summer of 2024. Okay, we'll zoom in now, and I'll just try and keep the April. Okay, let's just get rid of that. No, maybe not, because you won't be able to see it. So we are under this level right now. It has been a cascade and falling. Arguments about resetting because of the RSI, fear and greed, everything else, all still stand. But look what's a lot closer to us for Ethereum. And it's right, it's the vector candles, right where we are at the moment. We actually started, we completely ate this vector candle here on the way down. This one here, all the way back from May of last year, was eaten by this vector candle. and then we've got this little bit left. Now, there was obviously buyers stepping in at this level all the way back in April because we never invaded and completed the rest of this vector candle on the way down. So there's some interest around here, but just given the narrative around crypto at the moment, I genuinely can see this being eaten, even if Bitcoin ends up going up. Maybe it's just a flash getting through, but just sort of coming in and taking it down. Resetting is almost about 1.5 thousand for Ethereum before we have any sort of move up. Now, in terms of a short-term move up, I think this $2,100 level, I mean, it's 2,000 just from a psychological point of view, but 2,100 in which we have had all of these strong reactions. I mean, it took a green vector candle for us to get through it and in this instance, but the amount of times we've come down and bounced off it, there's buying interest there. Is there going to be selling interest as well? Should the price get back up to it? A little bit of a red vector for us to eat towards it, but I think it's something to watch out for. We'll go to Tau in a little bit more detail because I know people are more interested in Tau. We'll see if there's anything on the weekly to start off with. What I will say is the overall downtrend is 100%, sadly, still intact. You know, go all the way back to the all-time high, and we're still there. Here. See, this one didn't quite get it here, and then this has made a new low. This is a new low. We haven't been that low since November 2023. So I've seen a couple of comments coming through. I will get around to those. So we have made that new low. What I would say is each time that BitTensor gets down to this level, we have a strong reaction. Okay. So I'm not saying it's going to defy what Bitcoin is doing, but what I'm saying is if we start to see some moves up, potentially enthusiasm in terms of buying at this level may make this asset move a little bit quicker than some of the other ones. So that's certainly something to make, you know, to have a look at. And the fact of the matter is at 168, the 10 EMA on a weekly time frame is at 240. You know, so a good move back up today is still going to net you around about a 50% move, another $80 just under from where we currently sit. So nothing to be sniffed at. Now the RSI on the weekly it's low, but it's not in oversold territory. It is the lowest it's been probably since adoption in July of 23. So you know it's certainly feeling it, but we should be looking really on the weekly time frame. Sorry, the daily time frame. Now, when we look on the daily, I don't particularly see a strong looking asset. Yes, okay. The fall has been hard, and you can make the argument that Bitcoin has suffered just as bad. But it's really looking at, you know, maybe it's because it's an old coin, it doesn't have the history, but looking what it's fallen into. So we lost this low. You know, we scaled out of it. We then cascaded and fell very hard all the way through. We lost pretty much 50% of the value. We did lose 50% of our value, if I can find it, in the same time that Bitcoin lost around about, I don't know, 30%. So it's probably par for an altcoin, to be honest with you. But we've also now lost levels where we were ranging back in April, whereas Bitcoin's fallen back into the range. BitTensor at the moment is still below that. And I worry at the Herculean effort it's going to take to get through. Now, it can do it. We saw in last year through to November, you know, this was October 10, and yet everything else died and BitTensor flied. So it can certainly do it, but it's got some levels to get through. We weren't that long ago near the 10 EMA. 10 EMA has been controlling us, and it's 20 EMA that's been kicking us back pretty much since November. You know, we've had one instance where we had a battle with a 50 EMA. We never broke the cloud. We came back down. So the 20, let's say the 20 is what's really ruling the roost at the moment. At 214, it's also tying in with the base of sort of this level here. So yes, you know, all the markets are oversold at the moment. RSI is indicating it even on BitTensor. We're starting to see some sort of recovery beautiful little vector candle here for us to eat back into, taking us nicely up to the 10 EMA. Still sub 200, but it's there. You know, that's a magnetism for us to move forward, but we've always got our first barrier at 200. We've then got it at 215. I think that's it's a decent move. That would be, again, a 50% move from 140 to 214, 50% move to get us back up there. That's going to help reset the RSIs a lot if we move there. And then it's just a case of, are we going to sit in range? Are we going to have another continuation of falling? We haven't even talked about the rest of the markets yet, which I do think is a big player as to where things are going. And even if we can get through that and we get back to the 50 EMA, or we get back to north of the cloud, the north cloud, north part, the top part of the cloud, whatever the word I'm trying to say, and we manage in all of this effort to recover back up to this vector candle here, it's only $260. And I say only $260 because it wasn't that long ago, it was $300. And I don't know what everybody's average buy is, but I imagine it's north of $300. And so we've just got such an effort to get up through to that in what I believe is a bear market now. So we've got all of that pressure to fight through the fact that actually people just don't really want to be buying right now. They'd rather just sit on the sidelines and wait for a bottom. Interest is at all-time lows. Retail is scared off. Institutions are scared off. And I understand ecosystems are making develops and all that kind of stuff. Fundamentals, great. But I'm a TA person overall, and the TA is suggesting to me that it's not looking particularly good, I'm afraid. However, we have seen, as I say, it only says here a 5% bounce, but that's from the open. It's actually best part of almost a 20% bounce. Certainly a 10, I think, if not a little bit more. 15% bounce from the 143 all the way up. So there's definitely something said there. If the market continues, I think this vector candle gets eaten through. Maybe we get as high as 190, particularly if we remain bullish through the weekend, and then we can sort of reevaluate. Dropping it down to the 4-hour time frame, again, okay, we can kind of see this bottoming thing, very similar to Bitcoin. We had 3 vector candles of harsh selling, 12-hour period, and then we had this green vector reversing, stopping vector candle coming back through, and we're starting to make those moves up. In terms of some of the other levels, we talked about that sort of like 190 level before. Well, the 50 EMA is going to be pretty close to that, but we can really see how the 20 and the 10 are controlling the narrative, and they have been all this year. And so with that in mind, there's a couple of vectors here, but we're talking again about that sort of 185 level, tying in with a 10 EMA on the daily time frame. There is something that I think would be a good move. I accept that it's already moved 15% today, and I accept that sometimes the rate in which something moves is hard to judge, particularly given the rate of falling that we've had over the last couple of days. So we could see a real big spring, and I have to accept that the further you stretch something out, the quicker it can snap back. And if we really start to see that momentum moving, particularly when the market's open and we get some other things out there, then perhaps that is the case. Sorry, some of these questions. So BCB is 25% back in BCB. Tony the Bull is long on Bitcoin. I have 2 very small longs on BTC on the 2 separate accounts. Maybe it's a bit of a hedge because I sold. But I've got a short-term long on both. I'm on my phone. Just give me a second. I can't imagine either is doing particularly well. Well, I say well, but so one's 10% up, and that got in at 65,100, and the other one, I can't go through the accounts and log them on here because you'll see my passwords and all sorts. Got in at 65,300 and is 5% up. Okay, right. So, but I'll just monitor those in terms of where they're going. They're not particularly big positions. It's in those 2 accounts where I was just trying to make that $200 a day, keeping that going as we see things. Do you think institutions staking ETH is a bad thing as they just dump the yield and there's so much selling pressure? It seems that alts can't really cope with the staking rewards in bear markets. Alts generally haven't really coped very well with the staking rewards in bear markets. If someone can prove that wrong to me, I'd be more than happy to listen. But as someone that, was into the DOT ecosystem, glimmer and all of that kind of stuff, near everything. Yeah, I suppose you can hold it long enough, then maybe. But I think if you watch these, I've just not been impressed with altcoins this cycle at all, and it's really changed my narrative on them. So perhaps institutional staking ETH is a bad thing. Yes, maybe that's what it is. They just seem to be generally selling anyway, and I'm not sure how the staking rewards, how institutions owning ETH works in terms of staking. I honestly don't remember that, so no comment, I'm afraid, there. So if we're looking at scaling out, perhaps partially on BTC, hope for a weekend pump with key levels 70, 74, 78. I'm giving you levels to identify. The point is for me, also a V reversal to 9K within a week. That'd be great if that happened. The point is, I'll give you levels I think the price might go to. Just because it hits it, I try and say that's not when you get out, because it may go higher. Wait for a rejection, okay, and then go. That's what I would suggest is the smart play. It's difficult to manage those emotions, but that's what I would suggest is, let's see what price action is doing. We're already up 10%. If you'd set yourself, oh, well, it's at 60, I'll get out if it hits 10%, 66. Well, there's no sign that it's actually rejecting at the moment, so it could go to 70. Okay, well, you could scale out. I mean, you absolutely can scale out, or you could just say, right, well, I'm just waiting to see when this runs out of momentum. It's running out now. The narrative's shifting back to being bearish again. Now we go. And okay, the highest it got to was 10K higher than where the bottom was. Now it's only at 8K higher. So it got to 70K. It's now only at 68, whatever those numbers may be. But I'm happy to go. And it's certainly better than me leaving at 60. That's how I would personally do it. BitTensor's actually moved up from 55 to 47 on CoinGecko. That doesn't bother me. I'm not fussed. It can do what it wants. Not every alt is moving at the same speed, up or down. If they all move 5%, they'd stay in that position. Stocks open green today as well, should help BTC at least. Yeah, well, let's just move on to stocks, then we'll come back to some more cryptos, because you're right. I need to use a different chart because for some reason they don't show on here. So if we just scroll down and have a look just at the stocks now, we'll have a look at the Nasdaq initially. So again, this is the futures. It is open. We are seeing that it's up 400 points. It's up about 1.6%. So again, a good recovery. I could do with, to tell you what, bear with me a second. Let's have a few EMAs on these charts. So we don't want that. Let's get rid of this. Don't know what this is. What EMAs have I got here? Sorry, should have had this prepared. Now I've hit the script button. What EMAs have I got? There's the 50. Okay. So interestingly, the Nasdaq has lost its 50 EMA. The 50 and the 20 are about to cross each other. But we haven't lost this base support of pretty much 24 dead. And we've made a pretty good recovery thus far today. But this is the point I was kind of making. Look, the Nasdaq over the last 3 days has seen some cascading falling as well. And I'm trying to avoid sort of this, turning this into a news. We've already been rattling on for sort of best part of 50 minutes. But, potential new appointment of the Fed with Walsh, or whatever his name is, particularly hawkish, wants to strengthen the dollar more than anything else. Yes, he may have talked about, positive things about Bitcoin in the past, but ultimately he wants to see strength within the dollar. So on that appointment, we saw the NAS dropping. We saw some particularly bad reaction to the earnings from AMD, NVIDIA's competitor. Amazon was pretty mediocre, lackluster last night. I think that saw a bit of a drop. We'll have a look at Amazon in a moment. Google initially dropped, but actually seems to be doing okay. I think NVIDIA's comes out in a little bit. When's NVIDIA? It's not for a while, actually. Okay, not till the end of March. But we can see NVIDIA's price. And there's talk that perhaps, this AI bubble's always been talked about, and has the market correctly priced AI in terms of sort of revenue that's been generated from AI equivalent to the value of the stocks that the companies are investing within it? And is that needing to be repriced? And has that just sort of overinflated the market? I think for the last 2 years, we've talked about NVIDIA carrying the Mag 7, carrying the NASDAQ on its shoulders. And it hasn't fallen too far, but it is at a pretty significant base level at the moment of 171. Now, the pre-open, you can just see that. I'm just going to change it so we can at least get to see the lines as well. Pre and post market lines. Not very clear, but it looks like it may open at 177. So markets do seem to all be reacting in a positive direction. The other thing that is causing some sort of confusion is the jobs data. Sometimes it's withheld, sometimes it comes in, it's not looking particularly good. Is the job market particularly healthy? And the reason I mention this under the same breath as AI is AI replacing jobs? So people are losing jobs, but that productivity is still remaining the same. And how are we balancing that out in terms of GDP and everything else, and how's that impacted in terms of valuations of stocks and just the overall health of the market? And the jobs data that did come out yesterday, jobs job openings at 6.5 million, which is obviously significantly lower than what was forecast. And off the back of that, those of you who are wanting rate cuts, we actually saw once it loads up, this drop. It was 77 yesterday, 76.8. It's gone back up to 83. But when we spoke on Tuesday, I actually took a screenshot of it down here, if it wants to load for me. It was at 91. So it is coming down, as in there's a higher chance of that rate cut, and things like the jobs data will help with that. So we're still in a bit of a kerfuddle. It's not till the 18th of March, that is, but the markets are going to react right now. And the fact of the matter is, the markets are still also reacting from the revaluing of gold and silver, which is wild to think that, $4,800 of gold, and we're thinking, oh my God, this thing's pulled back. Yes, it was pulled back $1,000. I get it. Silver's still at 74. I mean, 2 years ago it was at 25 or whatever. But that revaluing has led to sort of the dollar increasing, and that has come back up quite aggressively from 95. This could well go all the way back up to 99, 100, to be honest. We'll have to wait and see, and that's just going to have that impact. But in terms of the sort of the market open, now that we've got it, we'll just sort of go through some of these. So Circle was down at 50, estimated to open at the moment around about 53. Nvidia we talked about. Palantir, it's at 30 and estimated to open at 136. Some interesting geopolitical stuff from the UK at the moment in terms of MPs are asking for questions to be open about a $240 billion contract or $1 million contract, I don't know, that the UK government signed with Palantir off the back of Mandelson's recommendation, and his name is Mud at the moment. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but that was offered in February of last year. Was it February? I can't remember if it was February or April. It was one of these pumps. It might have been February, and that's why it jumped up so aggressively before pulling back. But it was one of those times that it really caused Palantir to sort of like appear on people's radar. So that could be interesting if that gets unwound or whatever, because no one else was allowed to bid for it. It was just given to them. Anyway, we'll leave that to one side. Tesla, so you can see it was 397 at the close, looking to open around about 406. Coinbase, 146 close, looking to open at 155. Microsoft, 393, looking to open at 400. Again, another one that had particularly poor sort of reaction to the earnings call. Strategy, so 106.99, looking to open at 113.5. This is very reflective of Bitcoin. They had their earnings report yesterday. We can actually have a look at sort of a very brief summary. So they were expected to be 42.93, came in at 42.85. So what's that? A surprise of 3.87. I didn't listen to the earnings call. B put something in Discord about it. I think they were down 17 billion but raised 18 billion, or down 18 billion but raised 17 billion in the period. So they're pretty much just treading water, hodl. And I know strategy gets a lot of crap when Bitcoin goes down. Trust me, they can take a huge kicking in Bitcoin's price. It'd be into the single figure thousands before they have to do some real serious damage. Reputationally, it may be damaged, but in terms of sort of economically, I think they're actually pretty safe, pretty secure, and he'll just keep buying. He is not going to be phased. Saylor is not going to be phased at $64,000 Bitcoin. He'll just buy. And then when it goes to a bull market again, he'll look like that God move again. He's quite happy with that. Astrid moving down. The market is open for that at the moment. Smarter Web Company, strong bounce up. So this market is open. Again, it closed at 29 and it's already at 35. So we can kind of see that the markets are reacting as well. But they have been in a downtrend for the last week or so. The VIX went pretty high at 22. It's now moving back down. When it's high, you buy. So maybe there's some sort of reflective in on that. David Smith with Palantir needs bidding. Yeah, well, do you know what? I sold my Palantir yesterday. I'm not sure if that's the right move, but I'd made 100% on it. And I just thought, you know, it broken a weekly level that I was looking at. Well, we might as well, I'll show you. So I had, it was this weekly 50 EMA, and then it when you go on the daily and you sort of, if I draw that line, sorry, I don't know why I'm having to justify it, but I will. And so it came down and it bounced up, and then yesterday is when we decided to get out. Or sorry, it was this yesterday. This is yesterday. It's not today's candle yet. So it was confirmation it closed under. We'll see whether or not this reacts. You know, all of these, unfortunately, this is pre-market open. We could continue with the falling, you know, once these gap up and then come back down. So we'll have to wait and see on some of those. I'm conscious of how long I've been rattling on. Hopefully I'm not boring everyone to death. Google, sorry. So this is, you know, Google had great earnings. Then the market dropped, and then it managed to climb all the way back up yesterday. So it defied the market really yesterday with a very strong move. Small loss on the pre-open at the moment, which will be recoverable. And then this is AMD, and this is the worry, you know, that where is AI and in terms of sort of it's finding its feet both as a employer, if you will, in terms of AI taking people's jobs, but also what value it's actually bringing in. And so this one, I haven't really got to the bottom of it because the earnings weren't bad, but the reaction was. So maybe something was said within it. But again, pre-opening here, looking to get just under 200. Google are golden in AI. Palantir has been done that one. Okay, perfect. Right, let's just, was there any I wanted to cover and I kind of missed? Excuse me. A bit of a snip there. BNB, let's just very quickly, I'll talk about BNB. Let's get it on the ordinary chart. The reason I say that, there were three news events, if you will, that I think didn't help Bitcoin over the last week. So there was, you know, economic data driven news events driving it down. So sort of the gold and silver being repriced, coming back down, just dragging everything down with it. Then there was something about Binance being the next FTX, and it effectively it suspended withdrawals, and there was concern that it was basically insolvent and it was going under. And to be honest with you, that completely passed me by because it actually happened on Tuesday, but I didn't report it on Tuesday because it just passed me by. I think I was too worried about looking at the price of the charts. And I was like, okay, so what's going on here? But the interesting thing I think about BNB, although it has fallen, I mean, this has lost half its value from its all-time high. It's around about 1,300. It's generally fallen in the same kind of ratio that the rest of the market did. You know, sort of down about 13% yesterday, which is very par for the course. We've seen a little bit of a recovery today. And the point is that I don't know if Binance is insolvent. I haven't used Binance for ages because in the UK, we can't use U tokens on it. If Binance is insolvent, the entire market is in trouble because it's still the leader of centralized exchanges. But the fact that its price there was no mass selling of it on top of the rest of the market. Just everyone was either selling or the price was just being revalued based on the fact that Bitcoin was falling. Kind of gave me some sort of confidence that maybe this is just a little bit of FUD. There were people talking about cease and desist letters being issued by Binance to stop crypto influencers talking about this, which then, you know, Gronk and that kind of suggested that they were all fake. And maybe it was just a little bit of FUD. So that was the second bit. And then the third bit, which was kind of brilliant, really, was Jeffrey Epstein is Satoshi Nakamoto. That was all over my feed yesterday. because in some of these emails, and I put it this way, I've not even bothered to check the emails. Maybe I should have done. He has sort of made reference to Bitcoin. He provided funding for MIT, etc., etc. And people basically put two and two together and went fish, but decided that Jeffrey Epstein is Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, I can't rule out that he's not, because we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. But let me just remind you, Jeffrey Epstein was in prison 2008, 2009. Bitcoin launched in 2009, the beginning of. So he could have still done it in prison, but I'm pretty sure we would have been able to track those logs and those communications of him using his computer time. And also, he's a narcissist. So if he had created Bitcoin, he is not, in my mind, not the type of person that gone, I'm going to hide behind a pseudonym forever. You know, that's not who he strikes me as being. So I can't rule it out, but people cottoned on to that massively yesterday, which again didn't help matters in terms of sort of driving that sort of price down. I would also add that I believe that the donations that were made to MIT were just made to MIT. It was also made to the digital currency strategic team or whatever from 2013 to 2017, so way after Bitcoin was launched. So maybe it is. Maybe he is Satoshi Nakamoto, and it's going to zero if that is true. But I just feel it was just a FUD. The market was dumping, and people just thought, you know what, I need to rationalize why it is. And I perhaps I'm going to end on that point, just to sort of say, look, if this is your first bear market, if this is your first time in crypto, those capitulation events unfortunately do happen, and they will drive even the diamondest of hands to graphene or the graphite. You know, they will weaken anybody. They will make you feel uncomfortable. They will question your belief within it. But Bitcoin has been killed 450 times. It's always come back. Yes, you may now have to re-evaluate your horizons and also what you were going to do this year in terms of any plans of retirement or anything like that. But it will recover. And if you are still in any crypto that you don't particularly feel comfortable being in, I would recommend then just getting out, because there's no guarantee we found the bottom yet. And as Jordan, who I know is watching, sent me a message saying, in skydiving terms, it's better to be on the ground wishing you were in the sky rather than being in the sky and wishing you were on the ground. And so if you just don't feel comfortable right now and you have any modicum of profit that you could sort of just take it. Just take it. There'll be another entry. You know, you didn't get in at Bitcoin when it was $1, so it doesn't necessarily matter. You'll just find another time which is comfortable for yourself to look to get back in. And I think, you know, if we find ourselves over the next 3 to 6 months in that this sort of like downwards trend, I think we really want to try and focus on understanding what we did right, what we did wrong this cycle, understand how we can be better next cycle, and just sort of build it on through. And everyone can learn something, even if you've made something from it. I think there's still stuff that can be done from it. A couple more things come through. Capitulation is all part of the process. That's right. Alts, on the other hand, stocks haven't properly even corrected now. When things have to get down, I will say that is true. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. I was going to say the last thing. The one thing that I think we need to watch out for. So this is the Nasdaq, but it could be the S&P weekly time frame. Okay. You know, we came down to the 20 EMA, slight correction, but look what that did. We start losing it to the 50 EMA. If we start losing the 50 EMA, we start coming down to an actual genuine correction, like what we had in the tariffs, down to sort of, you know, 5,500, you know, where the 200 EMAs currently sitting. What that is going to do to Bitcoin and the rest of the markets is going to drive this thing back down. And everyone's talking about, they're still expecting some sort of recession, some sort of crash. Well, think about what that crash is actually going to do. It's not just, it may V-shape reverse out of it and be done in 3 months, like what we saw in 2020. But if you're going to sit in it and you're going to sit through it, you're going to have to experience that. You're going to have to experience the drawdown that is going to cause. So just be cautious with it. Try and stay on top of economic data. Try and understand if we are failing through. And we are making a bit of a rounded top here. Okay, we have bounced from it. We've done this in the past, but we've just got to just keep an eye on it. Make sure we don't, you know, eye on the prize and lose it. It's really easy. 7,000. That's the figure you're looking at. We break 7,000 to new all-time high on the S&P. Right. I think we're going to end it there because I've been rattling on for absolutely ages. So appreciate it. For those of you that are catching it on sort of a little bit later on, just be careful the market open at sort of 2:30, 3 o'clock. It does look like some of these are going to jump up. So just bear that one in mind if you are trying to place any positions or if you're currently in any positions. Try and enjoy the rest of your weekend. We're down at the conference next weekend. So we'll see how the markets react over that. I'm sure we'll have plenty of conversations to talk about it. But other than that, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your weekend. Of course, I'll be around. I'll be commenting, posting, and doing everything else. And I'll let you know what I do in terms of if I buy that Bitcoin back. I might do. I'm only in an hour in, but I will let you know. Other than that, I will speak to you all soon. Cheers now.